Good morning, neighbors. Let's sing a classic hymn by Frederick Lehman. The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen can ever tell. It goes beyond the highest star and reaches to the lowest hell. The wandering child is reconciled by God's beloved Son. The aching soul again made whole and priceless pardon won. Oh, love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong, it shall forevermore endure. The saints and angels' song, when ancient time shall pass away and human thrones and kingdoms fall, when those who hear refuse to pray on rocks and hills and mountains call, God's love so sure shall still endure, all measureless and strong. Grace will resound the whole earth round, the saints and angels' song. Oh, love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and strong, it shall forevermore endure. The saints and angels' song. Could we withink the ocean fill, and were the skies a parchment made, were every star on earth a quill, and every one a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above, would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. Oh, love of God, how rich and pure, how measureless and Frederick Lehman wrote this, he was said while at a camp meeting in a Midwestern state in his early ministry, an evangelist climaxed his message by quoting the last stanza of this song. The profound depths of the lines moved him to preserve the words for future generations. Not until we had come to California did this urge find fulfillment. This is him speaking. And that at a time when circumstances forced us to hard manual labor. One day during short intervals of inattention to our work, we picked up a scrap of paper and seated upon an empty lemon box pushed against the wall with a stub pencil, added the first two stanzas and chorus of the song. Since the third line had been found penciled on the wall of a patient's room in an insane asylum after he had been carried to his grave, the general opinion was that this inmate had written the epic in moments of sanity. But this third line they finally did find out that's under question at the time as to who wrote it was written nearly 1,000 years ago by a Jewish songwriter named Rabbi Meir ben Isaac Nahorai, but Frederick Lehman actually wrote the music to it. Then it continues on. When I was reading, it says circumstances forced Lehman into manual labor, which reports say were packing oranges and lemons into wooden crates. But the lyrics flowed through his heart as he worked and later created the first two stanzas of this hymn. He remembered the lyrics he had scribbled so long ago at the revival meeting. So he'd written these first two lines after this minister had quoted the third line that had been found written on an insane asylum wall. So when he heard this minister say this, he said, it so struck me that I had to write down. It was just like instant. I began to just really hold on to this. So years later, he instantly just sat down and started writing these things out and the music to it. So he wrote, because it became a very popular hymn, Lehman wrote, these words were found written on a cell wall in a prison many years ago. It is not known why the prisoner was incarcerated. Neither is it known if their words were original or if he had heard them somewhere and had decided to put them in a place where he could be reminded of the greatness of God's love. Whatever the circumstances, he wrote them on the wall of his prison cell. In due time he died, and the men who had the job of repainting his cell were impressed by the words. Before their paintbrushes had obliterated them, one of the men jotted them down, and thus they were preserved. It's really amazing how God can protect the things that he wants written. Remember, the whole Bible wasn't like one man sat down and decided, I'm going to put all these words together and form them into a book. They were written through the years by Moses and different men, and how God preserved what he needed to preserve for us. Frederick Lehman was a reverend. He was a German Gentile. He died in Pasadena, California in 1953. He had written hundreds of gospel songs over the course of his life. But the love of God remains for all who are willing to accept it, and the song lingers for future generations to discover and love. Many hymnals carry the song within their pages. Here's a note about Rabbi Meir ben Isaac Nahorai, who wrote the third stanza over 1,000 years ago. He wrote a lengthy poem which extolled God, but later that same year the Crusaders invaded the city and murdered all the Jewish people. While we don't know for sure about the rabbi, he was probably one of the victims as well. And as I was singing that, I think of the second verse. It says, when ancient times shall pass away and human thrones and kingdoms fall, when those who hear refuse to pray, on rocks and hills and mountains call. There comes a time, I don't think we really understand the love of God sometimes, but there will come a time when people refuse to pray. We see that so much. They've always done that, really. They've rejected God. They don't want him in their schools. They don't want him in the public system. They don't want him in the governments. They don't want him, and they refuse to acknowledge him. But when I say, Lord, do we really even understand your true love? Because we live in a moral, relativistic society. We kind of define things how we want to, and this is what love is. Just ignore everything that's wrong and just give this unconditional love. But we see here in Genesis chapter 6, in verse 5, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. It's this statement, it grieved him at his heart. It made him so sad. It made him mournful that this is what I have created this earth. People continually reject me. Now their minds are just on evil continually, constantly. And it grieved him at his heart that they were just thinking of evil all the time. And that seems like the day we live in. But it's in Noah's day, many thousands of years ago. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Grace, unmerited favor. Noah was a preacher of righteousness, and he believed in God. Remember, he had no Bible. He didn't have these things. But he had a faith and a love for God and his ways. He knew there was a God who created the heavens and the earth, and he trusted in that, and he lived as much as he could a righteous life. And remember, there was not even a sacrifice. Jesus Christ hadn't come yet. But I think we mentioned earlier, as many as I love, I will rebuke and chasten. He wants to get their attention. He gave them chances. And the love of God really saved mankind, because Noah found grace, and Noah was able to build an ark and make it through. And at the end, God even paints a rainbow that people blaspheme now, but he gave a rainbow as a covenant, or a promise of his covenant, a seal of his covenant to mankind. I will not do this again by water. Now there will another judgment come, but God is loving, and he wants everyone to make it. He did not prepare hell for mankind, but for the devil and his angels. It is your choice if you want to go there. He made a way of escape for us. So that is the love of God. He is always trying to, anyone who would come, whomsoever would come, let him come and partake of the waters of life freely. So God bless you all this day in Jesus Christ's name.